5 fishermen went out to sea that morning. Only one of them came back with a story the world would never forget. He thought it would be just another ordinary day on the water. But what he saw in the waves would change his life forever. And what happened next shocked even the scientists. Jackson Reed had spent most of his life on the water. For as long as he could remember, the salty breeze of the ocean had been part of his every day, as familiar to him as the feel of a fishing line between his fingers or the way the sun painted the waves golden at dawn. Fishing wasn't just his job. It was his rhythm, his way of life. That morning felt no different. The sky was a pale, sleepy blue, clouds scattered thin across the horizon like pulled cotton. His old boat creaked as it rocked gently in the tide, nets sprawled across the deck, ready for another long day at sea. Jackson wiped the sweat from his brow as he scanned the waters, his eyes narrowing against the morning glare. But then, something caught his attention. About 30 yards off the bow, there was a strange disturbance in the water. A frantic splash, sharp and uneven, not the smooth arc of a dolphin at play, nor the leisurely drift of seabirds diving for breakfast. This was panicked. "See that?" Jackson called out to his friend Mason, who was busy untangling a line near the stern. Mason looked up, squinting against the sun. "What is that? Shark?" Jackson shook his head. "Doesn't move like one." He started the engine and steered toward the commotion, heart beginning to beat just a little faster. The closer they got, the clearer the picture became. A dolphin. But not one gliding free beneath the surface. This one was thrashing in place, bound tightly in the merciless grip of stray fishing nets. The nylon cords had wrapped around its body and fins, cutting cruelly into its skin. The creature struggled desperately, its tail splashing weakly, eyes wild with fear and pain. Jackson's chest tightened. Stray nets, they were called ghost nets in the trade. Abandoned, drifting traps left behind to haunt the seas. They were silent killers, invisible beneath the surface until it was too late. "We've got to get it out of there," Jackson said firmly. Without hesitation, Mason grabbed a hooked pole and began pulling the tangled mass closer to the boat. Jackson reached for his knife, adrenaline pushing his hands to work faster than his thoughts. As they pulled the dolphin toward them, they could see the deep red lines the net had carved into its gray skin. Its breathing came in shallow, labored bursts, its powerful body weakening with every moment that passed. "Easy, easy," Jackson murmured, as if the dolphin could understand him. "We've got you, buddy." Carefully, he slipped the blade under one of the taut lines and sawed through it. The dolphin flinched, but didn't pull away. It was too exhausted, too desperate. One by one, Jackson and Mason cut the cords free. Every strand they removed seemed to lift a small weight from their own chests. Finally, with one last pull, the last of the netting came loose. Jackson and Mason heaved the mess of wet, heavy rope onto the deck, leaving the dolphin floating beside the boat, free at last. But instead of swimming away, the dolphin lingered. For a long, suspended moment, it simply floated, catching its breath. Then, slowly, it turned its head toward Jackson. Their eyes met. Jackson felt an odd chill run down his spine. There was something in that gaze. Not the wild panic he expected, but something deeper. Recognition? Gratitude? It was almost like understanding. He swallowed hard, not daring to move. The dolphin broke the surface with a soft, whistling sound, circled the boat once, and then leaped gracefully into the air, not high, not like in the shows at marine parks, but just enough to spray the men with salty mist. Then it vanished beneath the waves. Jackson and Mason stood in silence for a long moment, watching the ripples fade across the water. "Think he'll be all right?" Mason finally asked, his voice low. Jackson let out a slow breath, staring at the horizon. "I sure hope so," he said. "We did what we could." They hauled the nets back to shore that afternoon, heavy with debris and dark thoughts. Jackson couldn't shake the image of the dolphin's eyes from his mind. He had saved plenty of creatures over the years, untangled gulls from lines, freed sea turtles from plastic rings, but this felt different, more personal. That night, as Jackson sat on the porch of his small coastal home, staring out at the dark waves, he found himself wondering, would the dolphin remember him? It was a silly thought, he knew. Dolphins were intelligent, sure, but it wasn't like they could recognize individual people. Right? Still, something about that gaze had stayed with him. But halfway through their route, Jackson spotted a shadow moving beneath the surface. He slowed the engine. The dolphin. It was him. Clear as day, the same dolphin they had freed just yesterday, swimming alongside the boat. Not in fear. Not at a distance. Right beside them. "What the hell?" Mason whispered, astonished. The dolphin surfaced, blowing a misty breath from its blowhole, then dipped back under and reappeared on the other side of the boat, pacing them like a silent companion. Jackson's heart quickened. He felt that same shiver down his spine. No way. No way this was a coincidence. "Is he following us?" Mason asked, voice caught between disbelief and awe. Jackson didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew the truth. For the rest of the day, the dolphin never left their side. Even as they pulled in their lines and set their course home, it trailed behind the boat, occasionally leaping from the water as if to say, "I'm still here. I remember." That night, Jackson barely slept. His mind turned over and over the strange events of the day. He thought about what scientists had said on documentaries. Dolphins were social, empathetic, even capable of recognizing themselves in mirrors. But this felt like more. This felt like connection. Was it possible the dolphin wasn't just grateful, but trying to communicate something? Jackson couldn't explain it, but he knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, they would go out again. And this time, he would be ready. When Jackson steered his boat out of the harbor the next morning, he could hardly believe he was scanning the waters for a dolphin. It felt ridiculous, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long beams of gold across the ocean's surface. The sea was quiet, only the soft slap of waves against the hull breaking the silence. Mason, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, sat at the stern. "You really think he'll come back?" he asked skeptically. Jackson didn't answer, because a part of him, deep in his gut, already knew. And then, just as the thought crossed his mind, he saw it. A sleek gray shape gliding beneath the surface, moving fast toward the bow. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. "It's him," he whispered. The dolphin broke the surface with a spray of mist, arching gracefully through the air before landing back in the water with barely a splash. He circled the boat once, twice, as if greeting them, then swam just ahead, keeping pace as they moved farther out to sea. Mason sat up straight, now fully awake. "All right, that's no accident." Jackson tightened his grip on the wheel, his eyes following the dolphin's every move. Something was happening here, something he couldn't explain. For the next few days, the dolphin returned every morning like clockwork. No matter what part of the coastline they fished, he found them. He swam alongside their boat, surfaced often, sometimes releasing a series of sharp whistles and clicks, as if trying to speak. He would leap and spin, dive and reappear, always close, always watching. Other fishermen noticed too. "Jackson," one called out from a nearby trawler, "looks like you've made yourself a friend." But it wasn't friendship that Jackson felt in his bones. It was a message. And each day, the dolphin's behavior grew more urgent. He no longer simply followed the boat. He started darting ahead, circling back, splashing the water, trying to catch their attention. Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that the dolphin wanted them to follow him. But follow him where? On the fourth day, the answer came. It was early, the sun still climbing. Jackson and Mason had barely set their lines when the dolphin surfaced just yards from the boat. He emitted a long, high-pitched whistle, then swam rapidly away from the boat, pausing only to glance back as if to say, "Come on, hurry." Jackson didn't hesitate. He fired up the engine, ignoring Mason's puzzled expression, and steered after the dolphin. For over an hour, they followed him farther from shore than they normally fished. The coastline faded into a hazy line behind them, the sea deepened to a dark indigo, and a strange quiet settled over the boat. "Jackson," Mason said, concern creeping into his voice, "this is open water. Nothing out here." But Jackson didn't answer. He kept his eyes locked on the dolphin, who surged ahead, determined. Finally, the dolphin slowed, near an isolated stretch of ocean marked by clusters of drifting kelp. He circled tightly, making short, urgent whistles. Jackson cut the engine. They drifted in uneasy silence. "What is it?" Mason murmured. Then they saw it. Beneath the surface, tangled in a mass of abandoned netting, was not just one dolphin, but an entire pod. At least 7 dolphins were trapped beneath the kelp beds, their tails and fins hopelessly bound in gnarled, translucent lines. Some were barely moving. Others thrashed weakly, trying to surface for air. Jackson's heart clenched. "They're drowning," he breathed. Without thinking, he grabbed the gaff hook, a knife, and dove into the water. The cold bit into his skin, but adrenaline drowned out the shock. He kicked hard toward the trapped pod, Mason following close behind him with a line to the boat. Up close, the damage was worse than they had feared. The nets were thick with seaweed and barnacles, heavy and unforgiving. The dolphin's skin was chafed raw, deep cuts lining their flippers and tails. Some of them still fought. Others had gone terrifyingly still. Jackson worked fast, slicing through the cords, freeing the first dolphin's tail. It bolted to the surface for air, spraying mist into the sky. Encouraged, Mason tackled the next. They worked side by side, underwater and above, hauling netting into the boat, cutting through impossible tangles. The dolphin who had led them here stayed close, circling anxiously as if counting each rescue. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun rose higher, burning against their backs as they struggled to save every last trapped dolphin. Finally, the last of the pod was free. The dolphins swam in slow, deliberate circles around the boat, some leaping out of the water in celebration, others brushing gently against Jackson and Mason as if in gratitude. Jackson's chest heaved with exhaustion, and something else, relief, awe, something far deeper than words could capture. As they hauled the last of the ghost nets aboard, Jackson looked over at Mason, water dripping from their faces. "I don't think we found them," Jackson said quietly. "I think he found us." They both turned to watch as the dolphin, their dolphin, surfaced one more time, letting out a series of sharp clicks and whistles. A language of its own, a message they didn't need to understand with words. Back on shore, the story spread like wildfire. The local wildlife rescue center sent boats to the site. Marine biologists and oceanographers arrived within hours. They documented the ghost nets, took samples, examined the freed dolphins. What amazed them most wasn't just the rescue. It was the behavior of the dolphin who had led Jackson to the trapped pod. "He remembered you," one scientist said in awe. "He trusted you enough to come back for help." Another added, "Dolphins are known for their intelligence, but this is extraordinary." News crews arrived next. Jackson hated the attention, but he spoke when asked, his voice steady but humble. "I don't know what you want me to say," he admitted. "I only know this. He needed help. So we followed him. And thank God they did." For several days after the rescue, the dolphin remained close to shore, as if making sure his pod was safe. He would surface near Jackson's boat in the mornings, watching quietly, then disappear beneath the waves as the sun climbed higher in the sky. On the final day, Jackson stood on the bow of his boat, staring across the water. The dolphin surfaced one last time. For a heartbeat, they looked at each other across the rippling waves. No whistles, no clicks, just a moment of silent understanding. Then, with a graceful arch, the dolphin slipped beneath the surface and vanished into the open ocean. Gone, but never forgotten. The story of Jackson Reed and the dolphin spread faster than the tide. At first, it was just whispers in the local marina. Fishermen swapped tales over mugs of black coffee, shaking their heads in disbelief. "Did you hear about Jackson? Followed a dolphin and saved a whole pod. Reckon it really happened." Then the local news stations picked it up. "Local fisherman saves trapped dolphins after animal leads him to danger." By the end of the week, it had gone national, then global. News anchors in polished studios told the story with bright eyes and wide smiles. Marine biologists were invited to speak on television, describing the event as a rare example of interspecies cooperation in the wild. But for Jackson, the attention felt strange. He didn't see himself as a hero. Not at all. "I just did what anyone would have done," he told the third journalist, who came knocking on his weather-worn front door. But deep inside, he knew the truth. Not everyone would have listened. Not everyone would have followed. Marine researchers from across the country descended on Jackson's small coastal town, eager to study the behavior of the dolphin who had led them to the trapped pod. They analyzed Jackson's photos and videos from the rescue, cross-referenced them with tracking data, and interviewed every eyewitness who had seen the dolphin swimming near the fishing boats. What they discovered amazed them. "That dolphin," said Dr. Evelyn Harper, a leading marine mammal expert, "was already known to us. We tagged him 2 years ago after he got entangled in nets near a commercial fishing route. He survived, but we lost track of him." She pulled up data points on a glowing tablet, her finger tracing migration routes along the coastline. Until now. What astonished her and her colleagues wasn't just the dolphin's survival. It was his remarkable memory. Dolphins were known to recognize individual humans, even after years apart. But leading someone to help save others? That was extraordinary. "It's like he sought out the very people who once helped him," Dr. Harper explained in a press conference. "And he guided them back to save his pod. It shows a level of social intelligence and emotional connection that we're only beginning to understand." The crowd of reporters buzzed with excitement. Jackson just stood to the side, arms crossed, watching the flashing cameras and microphones. He didn't care about the interviews. What mattered was that the dolphins were alive. The town embraced the story. Children painted murals of dolphins on the walls of the local school. A bakery sold dolphin-shaped cookies. Fishermen who once rolled their eyes at conservationists began carrying knives specifically to cut free any nets they found adrift. And every morning, Jackson found himself looking out to sea, wondering if his old friend might return. Days passed. Weeks. but the water remained still. The dolphin had gone, back to his life in the deep blue. And maybe, Jackson thought, that was exactly how it should be. One morning, about a month after the rescue, Jackson visited the Marine Rescue Center. The staff greeted him like family. He walked past rows of rehabilitated animals, seabirds with splinted wings, sea turtles recovering from plastic injuries. In a saltwater pool, a few of the rescued dolphins splashed and played, their wounds nearly healed. "They're doing well," said Dr. Harper, stepping beside him. "We'll be releasing them soon." Jackson smiled faintly. "Good." She paused, then added, "We've been analyzing the audio recordings from that day." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "The clicks and whistles?" "Yes." Dr. Harper's eyes sparkled. "You might want to hear this." She led him into a small room filled with monitors and equipment. On the screen, a waveform pulsed as the sounds of the ocean played back. The rhythmic clicking of the dolphins, the rush of water, the high-pitched whistles. "We ran it through pattern recognition software," she explained. "There's a sequence the lead dolphin repeated over and over." She hit a button. The audio looped. 3 sharp clicks, a pause, 2 longer whistles. "It's not random," she continued. "It's a distress call. But more than that, it's a location marker." Jackson frowned, trying to understand. "He was giving you the coordinates," she said softly, "guiding you to his pod." Jackson stared at the screen, stunned. All this time, he'd thought the dolphin was just desperate. But he wasn't. He was communicating. He was calling for help. That night, Jackson sat on his porch, watching the horizon as the sun sank into the sea. He thought about all that had happened, about the dolphin's eyes that day, filled with quiet pleading, about the mornings spent side by side on the water, about the pod they had saved. He thought about how close those dolphins had come to dying, and how, because of one dolphin's determination, they had lived. Jackson let out a long, steady breath. "Thank you," he whispered, to no one in particular. And maybe, just maybe, to the one who could still hear him. When the dolphins were finally released back into the wild, the whole town came to watch. Families lined the cliffs, children waved homemade signs, boats floated just offshore as the gates to the rehabilitation pen opened. One by one, the dolphins surged into the open ocean, leaping joyfully into the sunlit waves. Jackson watched silently from his boat, a lump in his throat. But then, as if on cue, one dolphin broke away from the group. He arched through the air, spinning in the sunlight, and landed with a splash just yards from Jackson's bow. Their eyes met one last time. No cameras, no scientists, just them. A man and a dolphin, connected by fate, courage, and a moment of shared trust. Then, with a flick of his tail, the dolphin disappeared beneath the waves, joining his family as they vanished into the endless blue. Jackson stayed on the water long after the others had gone. The ocean stretched wide and open before him, full of mysteries and life. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like just a fisherman chasing the tides. He felt like a part of something bigger, a guardian of the sea, a friend to its creatures. And as he turned the boat toward home, a quiet smile crossed his lips. He had always believed the ocean held secrets, but he never